The siren's whine was a dull, exhausted sound in the early hours of Monday morning, a tired cry swallowed quickly by the concrete maze of Old Town. Detective Elias Thorne leaned his forehead against the cold window of the unmarked cruiser, the condensation a blurry mirror for his own fatigue. He was 42, with eyes that had seen too many shadows and a beard that was perpetually one day past being neatly trimmed. His partner, Detective Lena Ricci, a pragmatic woman who treated every crime scene like a puzzle demanding respect, was driving, coffees kicking in. Thorne. "You still with me?" Lena's voice was crisp, a sharp contrast to the humid air. "Still here, Ricci. Just contemplating the beauty of a 3 a.m. call-out for a noise complaint in a neighborhood that hasn't slept since the 70s. The dispatcher said the complainant was hysterical. Mentioned a mask, and, well, she was crying about bacon. Thorne snorted, a dry, humorless sound. Bacon. Right. Probably some drunk college kid doing a prank after a bad horror movie marathon. Let's get this over with. The cruiser pulled up to a faded, 3-story brownstone apartment complex, the kind of building where shadows seemed thicker and the air smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten things. The complaint had come from apartment 3B. They found the door slightly ajar. Thorne drew his sidearm, not out of serious threat assessment, but from years of ingrained habit. He nudged the door open with the heel of his boot. The first thing that hit them wasn't the smell of fear, but an overpowering, cloying scent. It was a bizarre, stomach-turning mix of old-fashioned rose potpourri and something metallic, something like pennies and blood. The apartment was a bizarre tableau of meticulous order and sudden, violent chaos. The living room was perfectly neat, antique furniture, doilies on every surface, shelves stacked with dusty, leather-bound books. But the far wall was a different story. Sprawled on the pristine white shag carpet was the complainant, an elderly woman, Mrs. Agnes Milton, now tragically silent. She was untouched, no visible wounds, her eyes wide and staring blankly at the ceiling. She looked like she had simply been scared to death, but it was the centerpiece of the room that wrenched the air from Thorne's lungs. In the exact center of the neat wooden coffee table, sitting upright and facing the door, was a mask. It wasn't a cheap Halloween prop. It was a terrifyingly realistic, oversized pig's head, fashioned from what looked like stiff, tanned leather, stitched together with thick, black thread. Its eye holes were vacant, sinister ovals, and resting on the pig's snout, pinned there with a single, antique brass tack, was a small, folded piece of paper. "Clear the room, Ricci. Call in a code 4 and a forensics team. Tell them to bring hazmat, I don't like that smell." Thorne's voice was low, strained. He stepped carefully around the body, his eyes fixed on the pig mask. Lena, her face pale but her movements professional, stepped back, pulling out her phone. Thorne approached the table, his breath held. He used the tip of his pen to delicately lift the folded paper from the brass tack. It wasn't a note. It was a photograph. Thorne turned it over. It was a faded, black and white picture of a group of 7 young men, all smiling broadly, wearing police cadet uniforms. The picture was old, maybe 30 years. The edges were soft, damaged by time and moisture, and directly above the central figure in the photo, a single word had been neatly printed in faded ink. "Pull." Thorne frowned. "Pull? Pull what?" He looked back at the pig mask, and then down at the meticulously placed body of Mrs. Milton. His eyes traced the outline of the pig's terrifying snout and the tack that had held the picture. He suddenly realized the significance of the word. He reached out a trembling hand and gently pulled the pig mask forward. It wasn't a mask placed on the table. It was placed on something else. The pig's snout was hollow, and inside, tucked deep where the eyes of the wearer would be, was a small, leather-bound journal. Thorne didn't need to open it to know it was important. He carefully lifted it out, but as he did, the bottom of the mask scraped against the wooden table, revealing what it had been perfectly concealing: not blood or gore, but a perfect, circular arrangement of 7 small, carefully placed items. 7 gold wedding bands, each one inscribed on the inside with initials and dates. 1 of the rings was inscribed with the letters ET 10/12/08. Detective Elias Thorne stared at the ring bearing his own initials and his wedding date. The metallic smell in the air suddenly sharpened. It wasn't blood. It was fear. Pure, concentrated, and aimed directly at him. He looked up at the wall, where a shadow that wasn't his own seemed to flicker in his peripheral vision. The air in the sterile, brightly lit evidence room felt colder than the damp chill of apartment 3B. Detective Elias Thorne sat opposite Detective Lena Ricci, the small leather-bound journal resting between them on a stainless steel table. The 7 gold wedding bands, including Thorne's own, which he had lost during a tumultuous house move 5 years prior, were sealed in a clear plastic bag nearby, their silent weight pressing down on the room. "Forensics confirms it, Thorne," Lena said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual energy. "Mrs. Milton died of massive cardiac arrest. No signs of struggle, no physical entry wounds. The medical examiner said it was pure, unadulterated terror. And the scent in the room. Not potpourri. It was a potent, concentrated form of linalool, a known neurotoxin when vaporized, often masked by floral scents. Someone wanted her terrified, not killed violently." Thorne didn't look up from the journal. They wanted her to see the mask. To smell the fear. To die knowing something truly horrific was happening. He reached for the journal, gloved hands meticulously turning the worn cover. "We need to talk about this," Lena insisted, gesturing toward the bag with the rings. "Your ring? Thorne, what in God's name links your wedding band, these 6 others, and that picture of the cadets to an old lady who died screaming about bacon?" "I don't know, Ricci. But the pig mask was a distraction. The rings were the payload. The journal is the instruction manual." He opened the book. The pages were brittle, covered in small, elegant handwriting that had faded to a sepia tone. It was dated starting roughly 30 years ago, around the time the cadet photo was taken. The first entry was chillingly impersonal, October 1995. The process has begun. Subject 1 has been identified as having the lowest probability of detection. The objective is purification. This city is a festering wound, and the badge we wear is the scalpel. 7 have sinned. 7 must be cleansed. Thorne flipped forward, his eyes scanning for names or specific crimes. November 1995. Subject 1 exhibits high levels of arrogance, believing his abuses of power are hidden by the blue shield. He thinks taking a cut from the drug bust is clever. We know better. The first extraction must be symbolic. They love the smell of the slaughterhouse, so they will wear the snout. Thorne stopped breathing. The pig mask. Ricci, run this name. Marcus Kalen. Patrol officer, 1995 to 1997. Thorne pointed to an underlined name near the end of the November entry. It says he was transferred to a remote upstate precinct after an internal investigation, and then mysteriously resigned 6 months later. Lena immediately began running the name through the department database. Thorne turned the page, and the tone shifted. The meticulous documentation gave way to a philosophical, increasingly disturbed manifesto. The writer believed he was a witch hunter within the police force, targeting officers who had corrupted their oath, but the next entry was what solidified the dread pooling in Thorne's stomach. It was dated last week, November 2025. 30 years of dormancy. The city thought the corruption had been rooted out. They were wrong. They simply allowed the roots to grow deeper, slower, stronger. Subject 7 is still an active officer, high-ranking, and the most dangerous of all. He thinks he is untouchable because the sins of the past are buried. They aren't buried. They are preserved. The pig mask has been resurrected. The circle of 7 rings is now complete. The first witness, the one who cried out, has been silenced. Now, the hunt begins for Subject 2. Lena's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. Thorne, Marcus Kalen, he didn't resign. He was found dead in a hunting accident in '98. Ruled accidental. Single gunshot wound to the chest. Thorne slammed his hand on the table, making the evidence bag jump. A lie. The journal says he was extracted. Not killed, but removed from the system so the writer could focus on the others. They fake his death, or someone else did. This isn't just about killing bad cops, Ricci. It's about a decades-long purge planned by someone inside the department, and they've just completed the setup for the final phase. He looked back down at the journal, at the terrifying phrase he had overlooked. Subject 7 is still an active officer, high-ranking. Thorne thought back to the photograph taken 30 years ago, the 7 smiling cadets. He knew 4 of those faces. They were still with the force. One was Captain of Internal Affairs. Another, a decorated deputy chief, and one of them had a ring on the table that he flipped to the next page, hoping for the identity of Subject 2, the next target. The page was blank, save for a single, new entry, written in fresh, black ink at tomorrow. The name Marcus Kalen had blown a hole through the official police narrative. A hunting accident was the clean cover story for Subject 1. Thorne and Richie were now operating in a terrifying bubble of isolation, unable to trust any document bearing an official seal. Kalen's wife is still alive, Lena announced, pulling up a decades-old police portrait on the screen. Lives in upstate New York. I'm putting in a request to see her, citing a cold case review. It's thin, but it's all we've got. Thorne was still fixated on the journal's final entry, tomorrow. If the killer, the witch hunter, thinks Subject 2's extraction is tomorrow, then we have less than 24 hours to figure out who is who in that damn photo. He took the photograph of the 7 cadets and placed it next to the police registry search results. Marcus Kalen, status, deceased, official. Subject 1, journal, Alan Hayes, status, Deputy Chief of Patrol. Decorated. Ring is present on the table, Clarissa Vance, status, Captain of Internal Affairs. No ring present, Victor Chen, status, retired, living in Florida. No ring present, Frank Dalton, status, current city mayor. No ring present, Elias Thorne, status, detective. Ring is present on the table, the central figure, status, unknown. Face heavily faded in the photo. No ring present. The rings, Thorne muttered, running his thumb over the cold plastic containing his own wedding band. 4 rings are missing from the 7. The killer only put 3 of the surviving cadets' rings on the table, plus mine. Why? Wait, Lena interrupted, her eyes glued to the internal affairs records on Clarissa Vance, the captain of IA. When I pulled the full file on Vance, there's a reference to a sealed case file from 2008, the same year your ring is dated, Thorne. It was an investigation into a breach of evidence integrity on a major narcotics case. It was dismissed. 2008 was the year I lost my ring, Thorne said, a sick feeling rising. It was the year I was partnered with Detective David Finch. That drug bust was our case. As if on cue, a notification flashed on Lena's screen. It wasn't a departmental email. It was an anonymous message delivered through an encrypted public Wi-Fi signal, tagged with a single, repeating symbol, pig face. The message contained a single link. It led to an anonymous video hosting site. It's from the witch hunter, Thorne stated, leaning forward. Play it, Richie. Full screen. Lena clicked the link. The video loaded instantly. The screen was filled with darkness, punctuated by a single beam of light from a flashlight shaking slightly. The only sound was a rhythmic, wet thump, thump, thump. A voice, distorted and high-pitched by a voice modulator, began to speak. To the 7 sinners who wear the badge, the time for reckoning is upon you. You thought the pig mask was dead. You thought your secrets were buried in the mud of this polluted city. But the mud hardens to concrete, and the secrets become foundations. The flashlight beam suddenly settled on a face. It was Detective Alan Hayes, the Deputy Chief of Patrol, whose ring was among the evidence. His face was contorted in terror, duct tape crudely plastered over his mouth. He was bound to a chair in what looked like a subterranean storage room. The distorted voice continued, the wet thumping sound intensifying. Subject 2, Alan Hayes. Your sin, the murder of a witness. A traffic accident conveniently classified as drunk driving. We know it was intentional. We know you covered it up. The badge is not a license to kill. The flashlight moved. The camera revealed what was causing the thumping. It was a thick, antique meat cleaver resting on a wooden block. Next to the block lay an object wrapped in a plastic sheet. The voice addressed the camera, but Thorne knew it was speaking only to him. Detective Thorne, you search for Subject 2. But you are Subject 6. You are next, but first, you must bear witness to the purification. The camera zoomed in on the object wrapped in plastic. The killer unwrapped it slowly. It was a porcelain doll, dressed in a tiny police uniform. The doll's eyes had been meticulously replaced with two tiny, gold rings. His wedding band and Thorne's lost ring. The two rings that were on the coffee table. The killer turned the pig mask to face Hayes, and then, with a sharp, sickening sound, the distorted video cut out, leaving only a final, black screen with the chilling, freshly typed message: the next extraction is complete. You have 12 hours until Subject 3 is named. Thorne and Richie stared at the black screen, the silence deafening. Hayes was gone. Murdered, and the evidence was just broadcast directly to them. This person is sending us the play-by-play, Lena whispered, horrified. They're not trying to hide, they're showing us. And he just called you. Subject 6. Thorne ignored her, his eyes locked on the picture of the 7 cadets, specifically on the faded central figure. Wait a minute, Richie. Look at the date on the journal's first entry, October 1995. The date of the photo. 7 cadets. But the journal only documents 6 completed scenes before it was restarted. Subject 1 to Subject 6. Hayes was Subject 2. I'm Subject 6. So who the hell is Subject 7? Thorne pointed a steady, trembling finger at the faded, unidentifiable face in the center of the photo. The writer of the journal. The witch hunter. He documented the sins of the other 6, but not his own. He never targeted himself. Subject 7 isn't the target. Subject 7 is the executioner. The drive upstate was a blur of highway and dread. Thorne and Richie arrived in the remote, snow-dusted town where Marcus Callan had supposedly met his end in a hunting accident 27 years prior. They found Mrs. Callan, a quiet, silver-haired woman named Eleanor, living in a small, isolated cabin near the woods where the accident occurred. When they mentioned the name Marcus Callan and the cold case review, Eleanor's composure shattered immediately. It wasn't an accident, she whispered, her hands clutching a faded mug of tea. Her eyes were red, not from recent crying, but from decades of suppressed pain. I knew it then, and I know it now. They covered it up. Mrs. Callan, who are they? Thorne pressed, his voice gentle, the department. The 7 of them. The cadets. Eleanor walked to a dusty mantelpiece and produced a framed photo. It was a clean, original print of the same cadet picture Thorne possessed, but the central figure wasn't faded here. The man at the center, standing slightly taller than the rest, had an intense, unnerving stare. That man, Eleanor pointed to the central figure, he told me the truth, right after they closed the investigation. He was the one who found Marcus's body. He was the one who staged the scene. Thorne felt a chilling confirmation of his theory about Subject 7. Do you remember his name, Eleanor? Of course, she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous level. He was Marcus's best friend. He came to my house, cried, and then looked me in the eye and said, Marcus had a choice, Eleanor. He was going to expose the 7. We couldn't allow that. He pulled the trigger himself, but I arranged the scene to look like a clean miss, so you'd get the insurance money. Consider it mercy. His name was Arthur Finch. Thorne and Richie exchanged stunned glances. Finch. Detective David Finch, Thorne's former partner from 2008, the year his wedding ring went missing. The same year of the breach of evidence integrity investigation. Arthur Finch, Thorne repeated, a knot tightening in his stomach. Did he have a brother named David? Yes, a younger one. David was always looking up to Arthur. Said Arthur was a saint for doing the right thing, even if it was dirty. The pieces snapped into place. Arthur Finch, the witch hunter, the moralizing executioner of the police force, had staged Callan's death. And David Finch, his brother, had been close enough to Thorne in 2008 to steal his wedding ring and monitor his life, perhaps even to plant the first seeds of corruption that would later make Thorne Subject 6. Eleanor continued, her eyes distant. Arthur said Marcus's sin wasn't just taking money. Marcus had figured out that Arthur was stealing from the evidence room, not money, but personal items from crime scenes. Keepsakes. Arthur was obsessed with collecting trophies. Trophies. Like the 7 rings. Like the journal, Mrs. Kalen, Lena interjected, showing her the picture of the 7 cadets. Can you tell us who the other 6 are, and what their sins were? Eleanor shook her head, tears finally falling. Arthur only told me about Marcus's sin. But he did tell me one thing about the others. He said that after he extracted Marcus, he gave each of the remaining 6 a single gift from Marcus's possessions, something that tied them to the original cover-up. A token of their shared sin. Thorne's mind raced. Kalen's gift. What was his connection to Kalen? They were just cadets together. Did he mention any names that went by a nickname? Something simple. Thorne asked. Eleanor hesitated, thinking hard. He mentioned a man they called the Sleeper. Someone who never seemed to be involved, but who was always watching. He said, the Sleeper will be subject 3. He thinks his silence protects him. It doesn't. Just then, Thorne's departmental radio, which he had left on the table, crackled to life. It was the police chief's voice, strained and formal. All units, we have a major incident. Deputy Chief Alan Hayes has been found deceased. We are looking for an active suspect we are calling the Pig Mask Killer. Detective Elias Thorne and Detective Lena Ricci are instructed to report back to Precinct 1 immediately to assist in this high-priority manhunt. The radio fell silent. The witch hunter's video had worked, Hayes was officially dead, and the police were finally mobilized. But they were mobilized to find a masked killer, not Arthur Finch, one of their own. He wants us back at the precinct, Lena stated grimly. He wants us close. The next target is there. Thorne stood up, gripping the edge of the table. Eleanor, thank you. You've given us the killer's name. Now we have to find the Sleeper before Finch does. As they drove away, a notification popped up on Thorne's encrypted phone. Another message from the pig face symbol. Subject 3's gift from Kalen was a book. The Book of Silence. Now, the Sleeper wakes up. Thorne immediately knew who the Sleeper was. He knew the one man who had been a witness to every major corruption scandal in the department but had always been too quiet to ever be implicated. The one man who was always in the shadows, waiting. Next part, Subject 3's location, and the decoy. The race back to the city was a taut nightmare, the radio blaring nonstop about the murder of Deputy Sheriff Hayes. They were hunting the Pig Mask Killer, a fictional boogeyman, while Thorne and Ricci knew they were really chasing Arthur Finch, a supposedly dead officer and a witch hunter. Arthur Finch is Subject 7, Lena ground out through her teeth as she sped along. He's the hypocrite purifier. He's using the police apparatus to hunt his old classmates. And he sent us back to the station, Thorne said, staring at the last message on the phone. Subject 3's gift from Kalen was a book. The Book of Silence. Now, the Sleeper wakes up. The Sleeper, Thorne muttered. Someone who's always watching but keeps quiet. The one Arthur said, silence won't protect. There is such a person. The only one left from our training class, someone who may have been involved in the Kalen affair but was never promoted. Lena caught on instantly. She pulled up the list of senior staff and the roster of the 7 trainees. Robert Stern, she said. Mechanic. Works in evidence archives and facilities maintenance. Never promoted beyond sergeant. He's been there 30 years, always sees everything. And always keeps silent, Thorne confirmed. Stern's in charge of inventorying the evidence vault. Kalen gave him a book, the evidence book holding the secrets of the other 6. Stern has kept quiet to protect himself. They shot into the underground parking at Sector 1, a concrete fortress with tight security. Finch won't be able to get into the evidence room, Lena panted as they took the stairs 2 at a time. You need fingerprints, a keycard, and a code. Finch has been here 30 years, Ricci. He trained the security staff. He's Arthur Finch, the model officer who died. He could have everything. His target is Stern, and the evidence Stern is keeping. When they burst into the main corridor, where there should have been a frenzy of a manhunt, there was an eerie stillness. Most officers had already been sent out to chase the pig mask killer on Finch's orders. They ran to maintenance, where Sergeant Stern had his office. The door was locked. Thorne kicked at the metal hinges. Inside, Stern sat trembling at his desk, eyes wild and fixed on a locked metal box. He wasn't tied up, not injured. Stern? Thorne shouted. Where's Finch? Arthur Finch. Stern gave a strangled groan and pointed at the metal box. He took it. He took the book. Where did he go? Lena asked, raising her gun. Didn't go, Stern mumbled. He hasn't left. He's up there. Stern pointed at the ceiling. In the evidence server room. The evidence server room was a windowless, hardened chamber directly above maintenance, used to store digital mirrors of all sensitive evidence. It had a single entrance from the floor above and a ventilation system reachable from the floor below, right where they stood. What's he doing up there? Thorne asked, looking up at the steel ceiling. He's wiping it, Stern said, voice shaking. Finch knows I made a secondary copy of the book and hid it on the server. He's erasing everyone's tracks and fabricating a fake Subject 3. Fabricating. A suicide, Stern whispered. He wants me to be Subject 3. He sprayed some of that sweet perfume in here, and he placed a paper pig mask on my desk before I arrived. He wants the cops to find me and think I killed myself out of guilt. Realizing Finch wasn't here to kill Stern but to perfect a case and erase the evidence, Thorne knew they couldn't call for backup. Lena, with me, Thorne ordered. If he's in the server room, he'll use it like a switch to trip the next phase of his plan. We have to take the hard way. Thorne scanned the room and spotted a tall aluminum ladder and a tool kit. Stern, is there a vent that goes straight up to the server room? Stern nodded. Yes, but you have to pass through the UV air filter lamp section. It's tight, and it's always maintained to Finch's procedures. As Thorne climbed the ladder, the cell phone Finch had used to send the videos buzzed again. This time it lay on Stern's desk, and it wasn't a message. It was a video call. Lena hesitated, then answered. Arthur Finch's face appeared on the screen, not the pig mask. He was in the server room, his features half obscured by the server's shadows. Hello, Lena. And Thorne. His voice, no longer distorted, was perfectly calm and glacial. I've been expecting you too. I'm broadcasting a recording to the entire department. A final confession. From Subject 3. Thorne had already pulled off the vent grill and was crawling into the narrow dark, toward the dim glow of the server room. Thorne was crawling through the suffocatingly tight ventilation shaft, the air thick with the smell of ozone and stale, filtered dust. Every scrape of his body against the metal ducting sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. Below him, Lena held the cell phone, staring at the composed, chilling face of Arthur Finch. Arthur, stop this, Lena said into the phone, her voice steady despite the fear. You've killed 2 men. You've destroyed their families. This isn't justice. This is madness. Finch smiled, a slow, utterly terrifying gesture. Justice is subjective, Lena. But purification is absolute. I'm doing what the department should have done decades ago. I'm removing the rot. And now, I'm broadcasting the reason why. He gestured to a large, industrial microphone on a stand beside the main server rack. In 5 minutes, my confession tape, the real one, detailing the sins of Hayes, Kalen, and yes, even the sleeper, Stern, will be broadcast to every police radio, every news outlet, every private cell phone in the city. It's the blueprint of the contamination. And it will be framed as the final confession of Subject 3, Robert Stern, before his tragic, conscience-stricken suicide. As Finch spoke, a flash of recognition hit Lena. She looked at the background visible behind Finch, a complex series of wiring and a strange, small metal box attached directly to the main server's power supply. You're not just deleting files, Arthur, Lena realized. You're triggering something. That metal box, it's a detonator, isn't it? Finch chuckled, a dry, academic sound. Clever, Lena. It's an electromagnetic pulse emitter. Not to kill, but to cleanse. Once the broadcast is complete, the EMP will fry every hard drive, every digital record, in this building, erasing every single digital clue of my life, my history, and the true identities of the 7. Except, of course, the information on Subject 6. He looked directly into the camera, his gaze piercing. I've uploaded everything on Thorne to a public, untraceable server. His final conviction will be handled by the public. He will be my last and greatest purification. Up in the shaft, Thorne saw a sliver of light, the opening to the ceiling of the server room. He kicked the final vent panel out with a grunt, dropping with a jarring clatter onto the cold, humming floor, his sidearm raised. Finch didn't even flinch. He simply turned, his back to the server rack. He wasn't wearing the pig mask, but he held a standard issue 9mm pistol pointed directly at Thorne's chest. Took you long enough, Elias, Finch said calmly. Always rushing into things. Always impulsive. That's why you failed to stop the 2008 corruption, and why you are Subject 6. The ring, Thorne spat, ignoring the gun, his eyes burning with fury. You stole my wedding ring in 2008. Why? I didn't take a cut of the money like Kalen, or cover up a murder like Hayes. What was my sin, Finch? Your sin was inaction, Elias, Finch stated, the gun unwavering. You knew your partner, David, was manipulating the evidence on that 2008 bust. You saw the files, you saw the discrepancy, and you said nothing. You protected your friend, and you allowed corruption to live. David stole your ring as a trophy to me, a promise that your silence would one day make you worthy of my judgment. Thorne took a slow step forward. It ends here, Arthur. Turn off the broadcast. Finch checked his watch. 1 minute to airtime. And you are standing on the pressure plate, Elias. Thorne glanced down. The section of the server room floor where he stood looked slightly newer than the rest. A subtle indentation, a hidden switch. Every movement, Elias, Finch warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. If you move off that plate, it will accelerate the EMP. You die, and the truth dies with you. Below, Lena heard Finch's final, chilling words over the phone. She looked frantically around Stern's office, searching for anything that could help. Her eyes landed on a large, heavy toolkit and a coil of thick, insulated copper wire upstairs. The computer screen in the server room flashed a countdown, 00:45. Thorne was trapped. He couldn't advance, he couldn't retreat, and he couldn't even drop his weapon without moving. Why the elaborate theatrics, Arthur? Thorne said, trying to stall. Why the pig mask and the rings? If you wanted justice, why not go through internal affairs? Finch's face twisted into an expression of pure, wounded self-righteousness. Internal affairs? I was internal affairs, Elias. I tried for years, but the system protected them all. So I became the purge. The pig mask is the symbol of the slaughterhouse they loved. The rings are the unholy union of the 7. And now, you are a martyr to my final cause. The countdown hit 00 to 10. Finch raised his 9mm to fire. At that exact moment, below them, Lena Ricci wrapped the thick copper wire around the heavy toolkit and hurled it with desperate force straight up into the open ventilation shaft. It hit the ducting with a deafening gong, a sound that echoed through the confined space and momentarily shattered Finch's concentration, causing his shot to go wide. Embedding in the server rack just above Thorne's head, Thorne didn't hesitate. He lunged off the pressure plate, firing simultaneously. The gunshot echoed violently through the steel confines of the server room. Thorne's bullet struck Arthur Finch in the shoulder, a crimson bloom spreading quickly across his shirt. The impact slammed Finch against the server rack, his 9mm skittering across the floor. As Thorne landed and scrambled for cover, the countdown hit 00:00. An ear-splitting, electronic shriek tore through the room, the signal for the citywide broadcast. Simultaneously, the small EMP emitter Finch had attached to the server began to glow with an ominous, building hum. "You're too late, Elias." Finch roared through the pane, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "The broadcast is live. The truth is out." Thorne ignored him, diving toward the server rack and ripping the wires connecting the external microphone. The broadcast cut out mid-sentence, replaced by static on police radios across the city. The EMP emitter, however, was still charging. Thorne spotted the power source, specialized UPS, uninterruptible power supply, unit. He grabbed the fire extinguisher near the door and slammed the base of it repeatedly into the side of the UPS. Sparks flew, the glow of the emitter died instantly, and the humming stopped. The digital evidence was safe. Below, Lena Ricci, hearing the gunfire and the sudden silence of the broadcast, burst into the room. She found Thorne standing over a wounded Arthur Finch, the room smelling of burnt electronics and cordite. "Check the servers, Ricci. See what he got to," Thorne ordered, keeping his gun aimed at the subdued Finch. Finch spat a mouthful of blood and a bitter laugh. "The only thing that matters, Elias, is the message that did get out. I confirm that Robert Stern committed suicide because of his conscience. The city knows Subject 3 is dead. And you, Subject 6, are implicated as the dirty cop who tried to stop the truth." Lena quickly checked the system logs. He was interrupted just as he was starting the main confession. But he did manage to send a decoy signal, a massive data file labeled "Stern's Suicide Note," to every media contact. It's blank, but the volume of the file is enough to crash news sites for hours while they try to decrypt it. He's bought himself cover. The immediate threat was neutralized, but Finch's mind was still racing, planning the next step. "You only stopped the EMP, Elias," Finch hissed, staring up at Thorne with pure malice. "The hunt continues. You stopped my justice, but you didn't erase the evidence. The evidence leads to Subject 5. Who is Subject 5? Thorne demanded. Finch grinned, a chilling, triumphant expression. Subject 5's sin was betrayal. Not against the city, but against the Brotherhood. He traded a life for a promotion. And his gift from Kalen? Not a book, not a ring. Kalen gave him a key. Lena had returned to the server logs, frantically searching through the files Finch had tried to access. She found a single, newly created, and encrypted file that Finch hadn't managed to delete. The file name was cryptic: CV 1999 lock. Thorne, look at this. CV. It has to be Captain Clarissa Vance, the captain of Internal Affairs, one of the 7 cadets. The one whose ring wasn't on the table. Vance is Subject 5, Thorne stated, the realization hitting him. Finch wasn't coming for Stern's life, he was coming for the key to Vance's sin. He wanted to frame the suicide and then use the digital records to expose Vance before Subject 7 could even be named. The date, 1999. 4 years after Kalen's fake death, Lena said, her eyes wide. And the key, a physical key. Vance wouldn't have kept it in a server. Finch, despite his wound, seemed to relish their growing panic. The key is physical. And it unlocks the past. Subject 5's promotion was granted in 1999 after a major incident on the waterfront involving an unarmed suspect. Vance cleared the scene quickly, and her career took off. Thorne remembered the conversation with Mrs. Kalen. Kalen gave each of the remaining 6 a single gift, a token of their shared sin. The key is the gift, Thorne concluded. It's the key to the warehouse or the locker where the true evidence of that 1999 shooting is hidden. Kalen gave it to Vance as blackmail, and she's been carrying it ever since. Lena looked down at Finch, his eyes blazing with fanaticism. Finch knew if we arrested him, he wouldn't finish his work. He wanted us to find this. He wants us to expose Vance. Thorne felt a cold dread. Finch was still manipulating them, even captured. He was using their own drive for justice to complete his deadly plan. Call for backup, Ricci. Get Finch medical attention, but keep him locked down and separate, Thorne ordered. Then get me Vance's internal affairs log for 1999. If Kaylen gave her a key, Vance would have hidden it where she knew no one would ever look. Thorne walked over to the discarded pig mask paper from apartment 3B, which was now lying on the desk. The original photo of the 7 cadets. He looked at Clarissa Vance's face. "We just saved Subject 3 from a fake suicide," Thorne said to Lena, his voice grim. "Now we have to save Subject 5 from the truth." Next part, the hidden key and the waterfront incident. Arthur Finch was secured in the precinct's maximum security wing, wounded but defiant. His plan to frame Stern had failed, and the EMP had been stopped, but the seed of his narrative, that corruption ran rampant, had been planted in Thorne's mind. Thorne and Lena were back in the evidence room, now focused entirely on Captain Clarissa Vance. Vance is Subject 5. Her sin is linked to a 1999 shooting incident on the waterfront. Kaylen gave her a key, Thorne summarized, tapping the picture of the 7 cadets. Where would a meticulous internal affairs captain hide a key that could destroy her life? Lena was poring over Vance's personnel file. Vance is fiercely private. Minimal digital footprint. But look at this entry from her 1999 promotion evaluation. She was lauded for her unwavering commitment to departmental memory. She even received a commendation for restoring and cataloging historical evidence. Departmental memory, Thorne repeated. She didn't hide the key at home. She hid it in the one place she felt safest, the one place she had jurisdiction over. The precinct's historical archives, Lena finished the thought. It's a massive, dusty basement room, virtually untouched, full of old uniforms, decommissioned weapons, and case files from before digital records. Vance oversaw the reorganization of the archives in '99 before her promotion. They took the ancient freight elevator down to the sub-basement. The air in the archives was cold and tasted of paper decay and mothballs. Row after row of floor-to-ceiling metal shelving stretched into the darkness. Kaylen's gift was a key, meaning it unlocked something physical, Thorne said. If Vance hid it here, it has to be concealed in something related to the crime, or something she personally curated. They found Vance's personal collection shelf, a small, glass case containing memorabilia from the 1990s. There was a faded police academy pennant, a small, polished brass whistle, and a heavy, leather-bound book labeled, Precinct 1 Operational Manual, 1999. The book, Lena breathed. Kaylen's gift to Stern was a book. Maybe Vance's sin is also hidden inside a book. They opened the manual. The pages were yellowed and brittle, but as they flipped through, they found a small section dedicated to property and evidence disposal. The pages here were thicker than the rest. Thorne ran his fingers along the spine. It's hollowed out. Carefully, they peeled back the section of pages. Tucked into the cutout cavity was a single, small, tarnished brass key, an old-fashioned tumbler key, stamped with a single, archaic inscription, Pier 4, Locker 11. Pier 4, Thorne muttered. The waterfront. The scene of the 1999 shooting. They immediately ran the locker number against the city's records. Pier 4 had been a shipping warehouse district that was decommissioned in 2000 and has since been mostly abandoned. Scheduled for demolition, they raced out, calling for a discreet uniform presence near the waterfront. They couldn't risk Vance or any of Finch's potential accomplices getting there first. As they drove, Lena pulled up the full, unsealed file on the 1999 waterfront shooting involving Clarissa Vance. Suspect, Jerome Sykes. Black male, 24. Unarmed. Vance claimed Sykes resisted arrest and fell on her discarded service weapon during a struggle, resulting in an accidental, fatal gunshot wound to the chest. The case was immediately ruled justifiable self-defense. It was a cover-up, Thorne said grimly. Kaylen knew it. The key opens the locker where the real evidence, the true weapon, the original unedited police report, maybe even an unrecorded witness statement, is hidden. They reached Pier 4. It was a massive, desolate brick building, cold and dark. They found a maintenance office inside, where a wall of rusty metal lockers stood, each one numbered. Locker 11 was at eye level. Thorne inserted the brass key. It turned with a dry, heavy thunk of tumblers unused for decades that he pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there was no body, no weapon, and no stack of incriminating files. Instead, there was a single, sealed evidence bag. Inside the bag was an item that made both detectives freeze, a small, children's plastic piggy bank, painted pink. Thorne lifted it out carefully. It felt heavy. Too heavy for just plastic. On the side of the piggy bank, scratched roughly into the plastic, were two initials, CV. "This is Vance's," Lena stated, bewildered. "The piggy bank Kalen gave her." "Why?" Thorne shook the piggy bank. It rattled with coins, but also with something else, something sharp and metallic that he knew he couldn't break the seal, so he held the bag up to the light. The slot at the top of the piggy bank was wide enough to peek inside. Nestled among the old, tarnished pennies, he saw something shiny. Not a coin, but a small, gold object, a locket. The locket was open. And inside the locket, perfectly visible through the plastic bag, was a miniature photograph, a tiny, smiling face of a child, and printed on the inside of the locket was a date, 1999. A single, chilling realization dawned on Thorne. The sin wasn't just murder. It was blackmail involving a child. Vance's child. Next part, the locket's secret and the identity of Subject 4. Thorne and Richie retreated from the desolate warehouse, the sealed evidence bag containing the piggy bank and the locket resting securely in their cruiser. They were racing back to the precinct's lab to process the find, their thoughts consumed by the miniature photo of the child inside the locket. "Vance covered up the killing of Jerome Sykes in 1999, Thorne summarized. But the real blackmail wasn't the key to this locker, it was Kalen's knowledge of what was in the piggy bank. The pig mask, the pig theme, it's all about greed and slaughter. The piggy bank belongs to a child," Lena said, examining the locket through the plastic. "A child with a 1999 date etched inside the locket. Vance must have had a child that year. The child's existence was the leverage Kalen used to keep Vance silent about his own corruption." Thorne nodded grimly. "And to keep her silent about Arthur Finch. Vance was forced into a web of silence to protect her child's identity or safety. The sin of betrayal Finch mentioned, it wasn't just against the badge. It was a betrayal of her own family's privacy." As they drove, Lena pulled up Clarissa Vance's sealed family records. "Vance has one child, a daughter. Born late 1999. Raised entirely by Vance's sister in a different state until she was a teenager. The records show the daughter's father is listed as unknown." Suddenly, the metallic rattle inside the piggy bank caught Thorne's attention. He held the bag up, and the small, sharp object inside shifted. "Wait, the coins, and something else. It's too small to be a weapon," Thorne said. He carefully manipulated the bag until the small object was visible in the slot. It wasn't metal. It was a tightly rolled up piece of parchment, protected by a tiny, antique glass vial, a message within the piggy bank. They couldn't wait. Thorne carefully cut open the evidence bag, sterilized the glass vial, and used tweezers to extract the brittle, aged paper. He unrolled it gently. The message was brief, handwritten in Kalen's distinct, sloping script. C.V. "The truth sleeps with the dead, the money buys the silence. The child buys the badge." Asked the mayor about the fire. "He burns the evidence to build the tower. The mayor is Subject 4. Thorne's blood ran cold. "The mayor?" "Frank Dalton, one of the 7 cadets." "Frank Dalton is Subject 4, Thorne announced, his voice tight. "Finch is targeting the mayor next, and his sin is tied to a fire." Lena immediately ran a search on Mayor Frank Dalton's history, cross-referencing it with the original cadet photo and any significant fires in the city around the time of the cadets' training. "Dalton left the force in 2002 to enter city politics," Lena read. "But in 1998, when he was still a patrol officer, there was a massive, suspicious fire that leveled the old docks warehouse district, the same area he later spearheaded the successful redevelopment of. He needed that land cleared for his political career," Thorne realized. Kalen knew Dalton started the fire to create a massive urban renewal project, and he took money to keep quiet about the arson. "The Book of Silence," for Stern, "the key for Vance's secret, and now, a fire for the mayor." Thorne looked back at the small, empty locket with the child's photo. The mayor's fire. The child's safety. How are they connected? The mayor's office, Lena said, slamming the brake as they reached the city center. Finch will target him in his office, or a public event. Dalton is high profile, easy to access. Thorne's phone buzzed with a message, not from the pig face symbol this time, but from an unknown number. It was a picture. The photo showed Mayor Frank Dalton, looking completely unaware, shaking hands with a woman at a political rally. On the top of the photo, a single word was scrawled in red ink, "Burr." More chillingly, a small, pink, plastic piggy bank, identical to the one found in Pier 4, was sitting on the podium directly behind the mayor. It was a decoy, meant to draw the police away from the real target. Finch is one step ahead, Thorne grunted. He knows we'd find the mayor's office too obvious. The pig mask isn't looking for the mayor, he's looking for the evidence the mayor tried to destroy. Thorne looked back at Kalen's message, the money buys the silence. The child buys the badge. He suddenly understood the mayor's true sin. The mayor didn't just burn down a warehouse, Richie. He burned down an apartment building disguised as a warehouse fire. And the child in that locket was someone who lived there. Thorne and Richie were now fully immersed in the witch hunter's game, racing not to capture Finch, but to expose Subject 4, Mayor Frank Dalton, before Finch's next move. The mayor didn't just burn down a warehouse, Richie, Thorne stated, driving toward the city's public records office. He burned a building where the mother of Clarissa Vance's child was living, possibly with the child. The fire was his sin, the child was Vance's shield. Kalen knew both. Lena searched the old Docks Warehouse District fire records from 1998, cross-referencing it with residential permits. The main building was listed as commercial storage, but a smaller annex attached to it was zoned for low-income housing. 4 people died in that annex fire. The report lists them as Jane and John Duss, undocumented workers. Undocumented, Thorne said darkly. Perfect for a cover-up. One of those Jane Duss was the mother of Vance's child. If Kalen gave Dalton a gift, it was the key piece of evidence that proved the fire was arson and that Dalton was responsible, Lena concluded. Where would a corrupt politician hide the proof of his greatest crime? In his greatest achievement, Thorne replied, pulling the cruiser to a stop. The new City Hall complex, built on the very land he cleared with that fire. Dalton's current office is in the Dalton Tower, the centerpiece of the rebuilt waterfront. They entered the imposing, modern City Hall lobby, a stark contrast to the precinct's decay. Thorne bypassed security, flashing his badge and a fake emergency warrant. They found Mayor Dalton in an emergency briefing room, visibly shaken by the news of Deputy Chief Hayes' murder and the citywide panic over the pig mask killer. Detective Thorne, Dalton stammered, his eyes wide. What are you doing here? I thought you were hunting this killer. We are, Mr. Mayor, Thorne said, his voice flat. And we're starting with the last man to see Marcus Kalen alive and the first man to profit from the 1998 Docks fire. Thorne pointed to the subtle, almost artistic architectural model of the Dalton Tower centerpiece, displayed prominently in the mayor's private office. It sat on a pedestal made of dark, imported mahogany. You hid the key in the archives. Where did you hide the truth, Mayor? Dalton's face went white, the color draining instantly. I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of my office. The key is the pig mask, Lena said, circling the pedestal. It's the greed, the money you took from the redevelopment, the life you sacrificed. Finch is coming for the evidence you burned. Where is the evidence? Thorne crouched down by the mahogany pedestal. The base was secured to the floor, but the wood seemed too thick, too solid for a display stand. The pedestal isn't a display, Thorne muttered, tracing a faint seam. It's a storage unit. A memorial to your crime. Thorne grabbed a heavy bronze letter opener from Dalton's desk and jammed it into the seam. With a sharp wrench, the top of the pedestal, which held the architectural model, lifted slightly. Inside the hollowed-out base, protected by a velvet lining, was a small, dusty red binder. Its cover was blank, but the scent of aged paper and scorched wood wafted out. The mayor's gift from Kalen, Thorne said, pulling out the binder. The mayor's silence bought Kalen more time. This is the official evidence of the arson. Dalton lunged forward, a desperate cry escaping his lips, but Thorne was too fast. He flipped open the binder. It contained two things: a handwritten, unsealed original arson report by the 1998 fire marshal, concluding the fire was deliberately set with high-octane accelerants, and signed by Frank Dalton himself, who classified it as accidental. A single, water-damaged piece of cardboard, obviously ripped from a toy box. It was a fragment of a pig mask, not the leather one, but a paper cutout from a cheap Halloween costume. The paper mask from Stern's office, Lena gasped. The decoy. Finch isn't using the leather one all the time. He's using these paper cutouts as a calling card. To mock their past. Thorne then noticed a single, subtle indentation on the binding of the red folder, a small, circular impression, no bigger than a coin. It was too specific to be accidental. He immediately thought of the locket from the piggy bank. He took out his cell phone, pulled up the magnified photo of the locket with the child's picture inside, and pressed the image against the impression. The impression was a perfect match for the back of the locket. Dalton, Thorne said, his voice deadly calm. Where's the mayor's office? Dalton, resigned and defeated, slumped into his chair. The mayor's office is the highest point. The architect's view. Thorne and Richie ran for the elevators. Just as they reached the elevator, Thorne's phone rang. It was an incoming video call, not from the pig face symbol, but from a private security camera feed. The feed showed the penthouse office of Mayor Dalton, the one they had just left. The camera panned slowly to the large window overlooking the city. And there, pressed against the glass, was the terrifying, leather pig mask, and underneath the pig mask, a note, taped to the window: Subject 4's purification is complete. Subject 5's daughter is watching. Finch hadn't come for the binder. He had planted the mask in the mayor's office as a final, public humiliation. And he had tied it to Vance's daughter, the child who was now watching the public disgrace of the men who tried to cover up her mother's death. Next part, the confession of Subject 5, and the identity of Subject 6. Thorne and Richie burst out of City Hall, the red binder containing Mayor Dalton's confession clutched tightly in Thorne's hand. Finch's stunt, taping the pig mask to the mayor's window overlooking the city, was a message: the system was broken, and his judgment was public. He didn't kill Dalton, Lena realized, running towards the cruiser. He publicly shamed him. Finch knows the mayor's career is dead. But the note mentioned Vance's daughter. Why? Thorne's mind raced back to the locket. The child's photo. The 1999 date. The shame isn't just for Dalton. It's for Vance. Finch is making sure her daughter, who is now an adult, knows the truth about her father's death and her mother's cover-up. They immediately tracked Captain Clarissa Vance's current location to a high-rise downtown office. She was chairing a late-night internal affairs board meeting. They found her in a glass-walled conference room, surrounded by junior officers, discussing the pig mask killer manhunt. Thorne walked straight in, ignoring the protests of the surrounding officers. He placed the red binder and the sealed evidence bag containing the piggy bank on the polished mahogany table. Captain Vance, Thorne said, his voice quiet but intense. We know about the 1999 waterfront incident. We know about Jerome Sykes. And we know about the locket. Vance's composure, built over decades of navigating internal politics, instantly cracked. She dismissed the junior officers with a frantic wave of her hand. What about the locket, Thorne? She demanded, her voice shaking. It holds the photo of your daughter, Lena supplied. Born in 1999. The year you covered up the murder of her father, Jerome Sykes. Vance slumped into her chair, her eyes tearing up. It wasn't murder. Sykes was a drug mule, he resisted. But he was the father. And I couldn't let his criminal record taint her life. So I made the report clean. I took the promotion. I protected her. And Kalen found out, Thorne finished. He gave you the key, the piggy bank, a reminder of the money and the greed, to blackmail you into silence about Arthur Finch. Finch just exposed the truth to your daughter, Vance. He's finished with you. Vance covered her face with her hands, sobbing silently. He said he was sending me a package. A final piece of evidence. A young officer hesitantly knocked on the door. Captain, a package just arrived for you. It's a wooden box, delivered by anonymous courier. Thorne opened the box. It contained a single item, a tarnished brass whistle. It was the exact whistle from Vance's personal collection shelf in the archives, the one she had been given at the academy, and taped inside the whistle's mouth was a tightly rolled piece of paper, written in Finch's elegant script of Vance. Your sin is complete. Your daughter knows. Now, for Subject 6, the partner's lie. Elias Thorne, your silence covered the original sin. You are not a spectator, you are the foundation of my failure. The last gift is the key to the vault. It is where you must wait. The realization struck Thorne like a physical blow. The last gift. The final token. Wait, I remember the whistle, Thorne said, picking up the brass object. Kalen had one identical to this. He used to say it was the whistleblower's tool. Thorne, your Subject 6, Lena reminded him, her voice thick with fear. He's coming for you. And he said the last gift is the key to the vault. Arthur Finch is a collector, Thorne said, turning the whistle over in his hand. He collects evidence. He collects trophies. And he collects the bodies of his victims. Thorne immediately thought of the most secure, most secretive storage space in the entire precinct, the place where the bodies of high-profile victims or informants were temporarily held before being transferred to the medical examiner's office, the cold storage vault. He's not coming for me, Richie, Thorne said, a grim resignation setting in. He's waiting for me. And he's using the vault to stage his final performance. He looked at the brass whistle in his hand. The last gift is the key to the vault. The small, brass whistle was hollow. Thorne twisted the top cap. It came loose, revealing a tiny mechanism inside. Not a key to a physical lock, but a digital transponder. It's a master key, Lena realized. It will override the biometric security on the cold storage vault. He wants me to walk in there, Thorne said, the whistle heavy in his hand. He wants me to be locked in with the bodies of his victims, Hayes, Kalen, Stage, and maybe others. And he wants me to blow the whistle on my own sin. Thorne looked at Lena, his face set. Richie, call the SWAT team. Tell them to converge on the cold storage vault. But don't tell them why. Tell them it's a known suspect, heavily armed. Thorne, you can't go in alone. He wants the final confrontation to be about my silence, Lena. The only way to win is to expose him, not as the pig mask killer, but as Arthur Finch, Subject 7, the dirty cop who faked his death. I have to blow the whistle on myself to draw him out. Thorne tucked the whistle into his pocket and headed for the elevators, towards the chilling stillness of the sub-basement. Detective Elias Thorne walked into the sub-basement's chilling stillness. The cold storage vault was a thick, steel-reinforced room used to temporarily store sensitive evidence and, occasionally, human remains. The temperature was near freezing, the air thick with the smell of formaldehyde and deep cold. Thorne held the brass whistleblower's tool. He stood before the heavy vault door and inserted the tiny transponder into the digital reader. The mechanism whirred, and the massive door hissed open, revealing a dark, sterile room filled with steel racks. He stepped inside. The door sealed shut behind him with a heavy thump, plunging the room into near total darkness, broken only by the faint, eerie glow of emergency lights. I knew you'd come, Elias, Arthur Finch's voice echoed from the far corner, calm and satisfied. The guilt is a stronger magnet than the badge. Finch stepped out of the shadows. He was leaning on a gurney, his shoulder bandaged crudely, but his 9mm pistol was aimed steadily at Thorne. He was no longer wearing the pig mask, but it rested on the gurney beside him, the final, terrifying trophy. You wanted to stage my death, Arthur, Thorne said, his voice level despite the adrenaline flooding his system. You wanted me to be found here, having confessed to my silence. But I'm not here to confess. I'm here to finish what Marcus Kalen started. Marcus, Finch scoffed. He was weak. He wanted to expose the corruption. I wanted to purge it. And your silence, Elias, was the foundation of my failure. You were the only one who saw David Finch manipulate the evidence in '08, and you said nothing to protect your friendship. You let the rot spread. Finch gestured to the gurneys surrounding them. On the racks were covered bodies, evidence awaiting transport. Hayes is here, Finch said, a twisted pride in his voice. Dalton will be next. And then you, Subject 6. I will lock you in here, and your colleagues will find you, frozen in repentance, with your suicide note confessing to everything. Thorne gripped his own sidearm. You documented 6 sins, Arthur. But you never documented your own. You are Subject 7, the greatest hypocrite of all. You faked your death, manipulated evidence, and murdered former colleagues. All to satisfy your own twisted God complex. Finch raised his gun, his eyes blazing with the fire of a fanatic. I am the architect of justice. And now, the vault is your tomb, Elias. Just as Finch leveled his weapon, the loud, high-pitched shriek of the brass whistle pierced the silence. Thorne, with sudden speed, brought the whistle to his lips and blew, the sound deafening in the confined space. It was the signal. Finch winced, momentarily distracted by the sound. What was that? The whistle, Thorne said, dropping the tool and firing a flashbang grenade he had palmed from his utility belt. The blast of light and noise filled the vault. Finch screamed, blinded, stumbling backward against the cold steel of the gurney. Thorne used the crucial second of disorientation to dive behind a thick storage cabinet. His own pistol raised. The moment Finch regained his sight, he fired blindly towards Thorne's last known location, the bullets ricocheting off the steel with terrifying force. Suddenly, the massive steel door of the vault buckled. There was a sound like tearing metal, followed by a deafening roar. That's what Lena Ricci had anticipated Thorne's plan. She hadn't waited for the suicide note. She had told the SWAT team that a hostile, known suspect was barricaded in the vault, forcing a breach. The SWAT entry team, wearing heavy armor and carrying shields, blew the hinges with a kinetic charge. They flooded the room, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. Finch, realizing he was surrounded, turned his weapon from Thorne to the charging police officers. No! You can't stop the purification, he screamed, firing 2 shots wildly. The SWAT team responded with immediate, overwhelming force. Finch was hit multiple times, his body slumping against the gurney that held the pig mask. Thorne lowered his weapon. Watching the scene unfold. Epilogue. Arthur Finch, the witch hunter and the pig mask killer, was dead. His long dormant campaign of purification had ended in the cold storage vault, surrounded by the evidence he tried to erase and the bodies of his victims. In the ensuing weeks, the truth slowly emerged. Mayor Dalton was arrested, along with Vance, who was charged with obstruction of justice. Robert Stern, the sleeper, became the state's key witness, his silence finally broken. Thorne and Ricci were hailed as heroes, but they knew the cost. Later, in the quiet of a late afternoon, Lena stood with Thorne on the waterfront, the newly renovated docks looking strangely peaceful. We got them all, Elias, Lena said softly. The 7 are accounted for. The corruption is exposed. Thorne looked down at the brass whistle, now clean and sterilized, in his hand. Arthur